Imagine your brain is a smartphone.
Mhm.
And imagine opening like 20 really demanding apps all at the exact same time.
Oh, and turning the screen brightness all the way up to 100%.
Yes, exactly. Brightness maxed out, you leave the GPS running, and you're just watching helplessly as the battery drains from full to absolutely zero in, less than 20 minutes.
It's stressful just thinking about it.
Right. But that invisible frantic energy burn is exactly what your brain is doing the moment you step off a plane to live in a foreign country.
Hmm.
I mean, we usually view moving abroad through this lens of a movie montage.
Oh, definitely. The classic romantic narrative.
Yeah, you pack your life into a cute vintage suitcase, board a flight, and suddenly you're just strolling down this sun-dappled cobblestone street, effortlessly ordering a pastry in a brand new language. It's framed as this beautiful, seamless adventure.
But the contrast between that cinematic fantasy and the actual neurological reality is, well, it's staggering. We love the narrative of a fresh start. But the moment the montage ends, the sheer cognitive load of daily survival sets in. Just buying a carton of milk suddenly requires the kind of mental processing power normally reserved for, like, solving complex math.
And that jarring transition, that reality check, is the core of our deep dive today. We're looking at the hidden realities of moving abroad and learning a new language. And specifically, we're focusing on the massive barriers of spoken communication.
Which is such a universal struggle.
It really is. And to explore this, our source material today is actually really unique. We're looking at a beginner-level A2 English learning script from a show called Emma's English Hub.
Along with some really interesting SEO titles targeting language learners.
Right, yeah. Titles like The Secret Trick to Feeling at Home in a New Country and Why You Feel Tired Speaking English. So our mission today is to analyze this very real phenomenon from the perspective of a true beginner.
To see what's really happening under the hood.
Exactly, and to extract the practical, everyday strategies hidden inside this script,
Right.
specifically how accumulating small victories provides the momentum you need to overcome these speaking barriers.
Yeah, treating an A2 level dialogue as a case study offers this remarkably unfiltered look at the beginner's mindset. The script features two characters. There's Emma, who acts as this encouraging cultural guide, and Paul, the language learner.
And Paul is great because he isn't just some abstract concept.
No, not at all. His character voices the very real, often really funny, and highly relatable frustrations that come with stumbling through everyday challenges.
So let's unpack this by starting with how the script frames the initial move. Emma calls moving abroad a dream and an adventure. And Paul, our learner, actively clings to that word. He says that adventure sounds, significantly better than scary.
That linguistic shift is a fascinating defense mechanism.
Right.
I mean, labeling a terrifying life change as an adventure provides a positive psychological framework, but it does absolutely nothing to actually mitigate the underlying anxiety.
No, you still have to deal with the fear.
Exactly, and you see this tension immediately when they discuss packing. Paul jokes about bringing his entire house, but he settles on photos, a warm jacket, and specific snacks from home.
Local spicy chips.
Yes, the spicy chips. And Emma identifies these items as tools to combat homesickness, which she defines simply as missing your home, your family, and your old life.
So those spicy chips are serving as this sensory anchor. I mean, the emotional weight of missing your family is the struggle we all sort of anticipate.
Sure.
However, the source material pivots really quickly to a challenge that catches most adults completely off guard. It isn't just an emotional toll. It is deeply and intensely physical.
The language fatigue.
Yes. The script introduces this concept, which is directly referenced in one of those SEO titles, as language fatigue. Paul complains to Emma that speaking and listening to English all day leaves his brain feeling so heavy that he just wants to go home and sleep for 10 straight hours.
And what's fascinating here is that Paul's desire to sleep for 10 hours is not a symptom of culture shock, and it's definitely not a lack of resilience.
Wait, really? It's not just him being overwhelmed?
No, it is a biological imperative. His brain is literally consuming glucose at an unprecedented rate. To understand why, we really have to look at the mechanics of what's happening inside a beginner's prefrontal cortex.
Okay, lay it on me.
Well, for a native speaker, language is processed with automaticity. Sound waves hit your ear, and your brain instantly decodes the meaning without any conscious effort.
But for Paul, I'm guessing that automaticity just doesn't exist yet.
Exactly, it's not there. So every single interaction is an active translation process. He has to catch the unfamiliar phones.
The sounds,
Yeah,
basically.
the sounds. He has to analyze them, translate them into his native language, process the meaning, formulate a response in his native tongue, translate that response back into English, check the basic grammar rules,
Oh, that's a lot.
and then on top of all that, force his mouth to make unfamiliar mechanical shapes to actually produce the sounds.
Doing all of that in the span of a normal, 2-second conversational pause, that requires monumental effort.
It's exhausting. Your brain is literally working in overdrive just to process a simple question about the weather.
Which takes us right back to that smartphone battery analogy from earlier.
Yes, perfectly.
The brain is just overheating from all these background processing requirements.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems Emma recognizes this physical toll in the script because her advice is simply to be kind to yourself. She tells Paul that eventually the active translation stops.
Right, you begin to actually think in the new language.
Yeah, but
Sure.
before you reach that milestone, you just have to survive the daily exhaustion.
Mm.
But I have to ask, if you're this exhausted, doesn't it mean you're doing something wrong?
Not at all. Surviving that exhaustion creates this fascinating behavioral paradox. The biological imperative to sleep and shut down cognitive processing directly clashes with the basic human need to, navigate society.
Because you still have to buy food and ask for directions. You have to exist in public spaces.
Exactly. You can't just hide in your room forever.
And that clash brings us to, honestly, one of the most compelling and funniest moments in the source material. It addresses the exact pain point of being overwhelmed when your cognitive battery is practically at zero.
The supermarket scene.
Yes. So Paul is at the supermarket attempting to buy eggs. And because of this massive cognitive load we just outlined, he experiences a total mental blank. He completely forgets the English word for eggs. The source even highlights this in an SEO title. I forgot the word for eggs. How to survive with basic English.
Which is so common. I mean, a supermarket is a highly stressful sensory environment to begin with.
Oh, yeah. The choices alone are overwhelming.
Right. And then you add a language barrier, fluorescent lights, maybe a queue of impatient people behind you, and your brain's stress response triggers the release of cortisol.
Oh, the stress hormone.
Exactly. And cortisol actively blocks access to memory retrieval, which is why learners frequently forget vocabulary they actually know perfectly well the moment they are put on the spot.
Right? Normally, that cortisol spike leads to panic. The learner feels foolish, they abandon the interaction, and they just leave the store without their groceries.
Flight response.
Exactly. But Paul takes a completely different route. Instead of fleeing, he approaches the cashier, makes this circular motion with his hands, and seriously asks, "Excuse me, where are the chicken circles?"
Chicken circles. I love that so much.
It's brilliant, and the cashier naturally laughs, but she instantly understands the visual and verbal cue. She says, "Oh, you mean eggs?" and directs him to the right aisle. Paul successfully acquires his breakfast.
A huge win.
Yeah, and Emma praises this moment in the script. She explicitly tells him that he doesn't need perfect grammar, he just needs to try. She labels this interaction a small victory.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, Paul's behavior is a textbook example of a high-level communication strategy called circumlocution.
Circumlocution. Okay, break that down for us.
So when a speaker lacks the precise vocabulary, they describe the properties or the function of the object instead. Saying chicken circles is terrible from a grammatical and lexical standpoint,
Obviously.
but it is a masterclass in effective communication. The overarching theme of the source pile, reflected in titles like No Grammar, No Problem, is that perfect grammar is entirely secondary to being understood.
Okay, let me push back on this, though, because I understand the charm of the chicken circles story, and it clearly worked in this one isolated instance.
Sure.
But doesn't relying on wild hand gestures and made-up phrases risk fossilizing bad habits? I mean, if a learner is constantly praised for saying chicken circles because they get a laugh and they get the item, aren't we just encouraging them to abandon the actual hard work of learning the proper vocabulary? You can't navigate a professional environment or a doctor's office by playing charades.
That's a really fair point, and it raises an important question about the stages of language acquisition. You are absolutely right that circumlocution cannot be the permanent strategy for advanced fluency.
Right.
However, at the beginner stage, the stage Paul is currently in, the primary obstacle is not a lack of vocabulary.
Then what is it?
The primary obstacle is the affective filter, which is the psychological wall of anxiety and fear of judgment that prevents a learner from speaking at all.
Oh, wow. So the immediate danger isn't learning bad grammar. The immediate danger is freezing up and quitting entirely.
Precisely. When an adult moves to a new country, they suffer a massive blow to their ego. They're used to being competent, articulate professionals back home, and suddenly they are reduced to the expressive capabilities of a toddler.
That has to be humiliating.
It is humiliating. By embracing the silliness of chicken circles, Paul is intentionally lowering his affective filter. He's prioritizing the function of communication over the form, and the psychological reward for that is massive.
That makes perfect sense. Paul even articulates that reward system himself with this brilliant takeaway line in the script. He says, one egg, one victory.
That phrase captures the exact mechanism of building motivation for speaking practice. Every time Paul successfully communicates his needs, even awkwardly, his brain releases dopamine.
Ah, the feel-good chemical.
Yes, that dopamine hit counteracts the stress and exhaustion of language fatigue. It creates a positive reinforcement loop. Accumulating these small victories, which is the focus of the source title, Stop Being Afraid. Small victories in English speaking is really the only way a beginner generates the internal momentum required to keep practicing day after day.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
You have your dopamine hits.
Right.
You are surviving the supermarket with circumlocution and hand gestures. You're fighting through the fatigue.
Right.
But relying on that high-wire act of creative communication with random strangers every single day, I mean, that is completely draining. And frankly, it leaves you feeling deeply isolated. You might be getting your groceries, but you aren't making friends.
No, you're not. The chicken circle strategy solves the problem of immediate survival, but it does not solve the problem of belonging. And loneliness is often the final barrier that sends people packing their bags to go back home.
Which brings us to the next practical strategy from the sources. How does a learner cure that isolation without completely draining their mental battery all over again? Emma introduces what the SEO titles call her secret trick to living abroad. Specifically, the local cafe trick.
Yes, I love this part.
And she doesn't offer vague advice like, put yourself out there. She gives Paul a highly specific, rigid blueprint.
And specificity is exactly what a brain suffering from cognitive overload requires. Vague instructions require executive function to plan and execute, whereas a rigid blueprint removes the burden of decision-making entirely.
Well, the instructions Emma provides are fascinatingly exact. She tells Paul, when you move to a new city, find a small cafe near your house. Go to that cafe every single day at the exact same time, buy a coffee, sit in the exact same chair, and stay for just 15 minutes.
Now, on the surface, sitting alone in a cafe for 15 minutes sounds like a recipe for further isolation.
It kind of does.
But the psychological architecture behind this routine is incredibly robust. By returning to the same environment daily, you are aggressively manipulating the variables of your social interaction.
I want to view this through the lens of a video game. Earlier, we established that language fatigue is like a player battling through a brutally difficult level, right? Where every single interaction, every new vocabulary word acts as an enemy that drains your health bar. You are constantly on defense.
That is a very apt comparison for the beginner's daily experience.
So the local cafe trick functions exactly like establishing a save point in that video game.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, it creates a designated safe zone. Because you go at the exact same time, order the exact same drink, and sit in the exact same chair, the environment becomes highly predictable. And predictability is the ultimate cheat code for lowering cognitive load.
The underlying logic there is rooted in how working memory functions. When you enter a chaotic, novel environment like the supermarket, your brain is scanning for threats, analyzing new spatial layouts, preparing for unexpected linguistic inputs.
Just constantly scanning?
Yes, but in your designated cafe chair, those variables are eliminated. You know the menu, you know the layout, you know the script.
You don't have to panic and actively translate a surprise question from the barista because you already know they're just going to ask the usual.
Exactly.
You can just exist in that space, absorb the ambient language of the conversations around you, and recharge your cognitive battery without the pressure to perform.
Furthermore, Emma points out the profound social shift that occurs after just a few days of this routine. The barista recognizes you. They say hello again.
Yeah.
And in that micro-interaction, your identity in this new country fundamentally changes. You transition from being an anonymous, overwhelmed stranger to being a regular.
Paul latches onto that concept immediately in the script. He repeats the word regular and realizes so I belong there. It takes a massive, intimidating foreign metropolis and shrinks it down to a single, manageable room where somebody actually knows your face.
Belonging is the ultimate antidote to the loneliness of the language barrier. This 15-minute routine anchors the learner. It provides a daily dose of low-stakes social interaction, just practicing the hello and the thank you in an environment completely free of judgment. It's a slow, methodical way of building a community, one cup of coffee at a time.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? Whether you're planning a move abroad, currently struggling with a new language, or maybe just trying to understand the invisible battles people fight every day. When we synthesize Emma's advice, Paul's struggles, and the underlying psychology, a very clear roadmap emerges.
The first major takeaway is definitely the normalization of the struggle. That romanticized movie montage is a myth.
A total myth.
You must expect the heavy 10-hour exhaustion. And understand that language fatigue is not a reflection of your intelligence or your willpower. It's just the physical reality of your brain processing massive amounts of novel data.
You also have to consciously choose communication over perfection. You must be willing to abandon your adult ego, ask for the chicken circles, and actively hunt for those small victories. Because it's the dopamine from those tiny, ridiculous successes, one egg, one victory, that provides the fuel to keep trying.
And crucially, you have to engineer your own safe zones. Utilizing the 15-minute cafe trick to establish your video game save point allows you to transition from an exhausted outsider to a recognized regular. And Emma's final piece of advice to Paul really anchors all of this.
What does she say?
Well, when Paul marvels at the idea of eventually thinking in English, assuming it must be magic, Emma firmly corrects him. She states, "It's not magic, it's practice."
It is the cumulative result of thousands of small victories and hundreds of 15-minute cafe visits. That pragmatic truth is just deeply grounding. But, it leaves us with a final provocative thought to mull over. We're conditioned by society to view exhaustion as a red flag. We interpret that heavy, tired feeling in our brains as a warning sign that we've reached our limit, that we're failing, or that we simply need to stop and retreat to what's comfortable.
Because avoiding cognitive strain is our default biological setting. We naturally seek the path of least resistance.
But what if the language fatigue we explore today isn't a roadblock at all? Think about Paul wanting to sleep for 10 hours. What if that overwhelming mental tiredness isn't signal to quit, but rather the literal physical sensation of your mind expanding? You're feeling the actual rewiring of your neural pathways in real time. So the next time you find yourself in an unfamiliar environment, completely drained and struggling to find the right words, will you view that exhaustion as proof of your limitations? Or will you recognize the fatigue for what it truly is, the undeniable physical proof that you are growing?